listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, the history of terrorist training camps in the Philippines. Authorities have confirmed the alleged gunmen behind the Bondi Beach massacre had both recently travelled to the country, with allegations they had undergone extensive terrorist training. We unpack the details on this concerning revelation and what experts say is a dangerous resurgence in deadly extremism. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Wednesday, the 17th of December. The New South Wales Premier, Chris Minns, has announced Parliament will be recalled next week to discuss urgent new reforms in the wake of the Bondi terror attack. Top of the proposed overhauls, new gun reforms and a temporary ban on protests. The proposed bill will limit the number of guns an individual can own, also reclassify some types of firearms, including pump-action shotguns, and also change the appeal process once a gun licence has been withdrawn. Mr Minns has also flagged that the government would seek to temporarily restrict protest applications under the terrorism designation.
My concern is that a mass demonstration in this combustible situation with our multicultural community could light a flame that would be impossible to extinguish. So we're looking at reforms whereby when there is a terrorism designation in the state, the police commissioner may not accept applications for protests on the grounds that it will both stretch police resources and, secondly, add to community disharmony and, as a result, a combustible situation in the state.
Meantime, the New South Wales Police Commissioner Mal Lanyon has given an update on the condition of 22-year-old probationary constable Jack Hibbert, who was shot on Sunday.
I'm really pleased to say that Jack was awake this morning. We had a lovely conversation. He's a really positive young man. Tragically, we know that he's going to lose the sight in one eye as a result of his injuries on the weekend.
Jack is one of 23 victims still in hospital after Sunday's attack. 5 of those are in a critical but stable condition. The first funerals of the victims of Sunday's terror attack have been held today. Hundreds gathering, including former Prime Minister Scott Morrison, the New South Wales Premier and federal opposition leader Susan Lee, to farewell Bondi Rabbi Eli Schlanger, his father-in-law delivering an emotional eulogy.
I knew that there's nobody greater than you. In the community, he was there for everybody. A person who lived to 41 years and achieved what a person doesn't achieve. The age doubled to him. Constantly thinking new ways, motivating himself how to help another person.
It comes as the memorial at Bondi Beach continues to grow. Former Liberal Treasurer Josh Frydenberg visited the site today, criticising the Albanese government's lack of action and calling for a royal commission into antisemitism. Now it's time to get into our deep dive on the resurgence of terrorist training camps and extremism in the Philippines. Joining us is criminologist Dr Clarke Jones, who works with convicted and radicalised offenders in prisons in the Philippines, to explain why the Southeast Asian country is a popular destination for foreign terrorist fighters. Clarke, thanks so much for joining us. Can I start by asking, there's been a lot of focus on the question of why Sunday's event happened. You work closely with terrorist organisations in the Philippines as part of rehabilitation and assessment programs. Why has the Philippines become such a hotspot, if I can use that description, for terrorists and training?
There's a lot of history here. I don't say it's just become a hotspot. In fact, I would say that the threat of terrorism in the Philippines has diminished significantly over the last 10 or 15 years. That's probably not accurate, but there's been a lot of work by the armed forces of the Philippines, the Philippine National Police, and also close allies to, reduce the threat. There's been a significant work on the peace process in Mindanao, Muslim Mindanao, and there's been a lot of surrenders where terrorist groups have given up arms. And of course, there's been the more harder edge, the counter-terrorism operations that have captured and put terrorists through the criminal justice system to where they are now in the prison system where I work. So I wouldn't say it's a hotbed. So this is why this tragic incident in Bondi is very interesting. Is it an indication that there are more organised efforts still remaining in the southern Philippines? I know there's sort of background information which I can't talk too much about, which would suggest there are still active elements in the southern Philippines. Is it a hotbed? And probably not a hotbed for what it used to be, but it's still a significant concern.
So, Clarke, from your experience with working with countering terrorism in the Philippines, can you give us an insight into the history of why so many terrorists travel to the Philippines to train there?
It's an environment that would be relatively safe for those that are connected, that can get into, be active with these groups. I mean, the borders of the south are very porous. So there are lawless areas. I'd hate to say that to the poor Filipinos, but there are lawless areas. For example, Tawi-Tawi, Sulu, some of these more remote islands, Basilan, even Zamboanga City still remain fairly dangerous places. Once again, I don't want to offend Philippine colleagues, but corruption is still rife in the Philippines. So there's a number of elements, local environmental elements that would make it conducive to terrorism. You've also got to throw in criminality. Crime is very much entwined with terrorism in the Philippines. Clan-based conflict, such as what we saw in Marawi in 2017. So it's not a straightforward question. There's a whole lot of factors that cause unrest in the south. If you are a local and you speak the language, you understand the various dialects and cultures, people can travel there. It's not impossible to get there. They're just, absolutely tropical paradise, really, in the south. It's just, such a beautiful locations, but it is still very dangerous, particularly for people that don't fit in the various cultural specifications.
Clarke, through your work, you actually speak with and also investigate terrorists that are behind bars. What insight have you been given about what actually happens at these terrorist camps in the Philippines? Because many of us didn't even realise that this is a militant training ground in the Philippines, but I'm of the understanding that it has been for many decades, and if anything, it's actually decreased recently.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of these camps have been severely disrupted. So it doesn't surprise me that there are some remaining, but I would have thought that that the police and the military would be well and truly across the remaining camps. As I said, those areas are sometimes very inaccessible, and it certainly doesn't surprise me, but there's more. And knowing that some of these groups, Islamic State, East Asia, Abu Sayyaf, are still active, there's very small groups, small pockets remaining, that there's a very, very strong likelihood that there might be a re-emergence of some of these camps. Terrorism still remains a significant threat in the Philippines, but nothing like it was. I have seen a number of foreign nationals through as well, so it's not impossible to have foreign nationals coming in to these areas, but that's what makes the Bondi situation interesting from a work perspective, that it would take some level of, if this proves to be correct, it would take some level of organisation to be able to link in with one of these terrorist camps. It is not a straightforward process by any means.
So from your professional experience then, and it's important to note as the investigations continue into the two alleged gunmen responsible for the Bondi mass shooting, that authorities have confirmed they did travel to the Philippines, but all the details of why they were there are still yet to be investigated or publicly revealed. From your professional opinion, if this did happen, you think it would have taken weeks or months or even possibly years of planning?
I wouldn't go as far as years of planning. I mean, if you think of the 24-year-old perpetrator, he was first detected when he was 17 or 18. In terms of his mental state around ideology, I mean, obviously that wasn't dealt with at the time. That's not being critical of ASIO or the Australian police at all. I know the extreme hard work that they've done and the progress they've made. But I think in this case, maybe he shouldn't have come out of under the radar. He should have been still a focal point. So that wasn't addressed. But look, it's easy to stand back and be critical at this time. But there would have been, between then and now, there would have been some links made. So when those links were made to now, and to be able to give them access into the southern Philippines, if that's what it was, then that takes some level of planning, that's for sure.
Clarke, considering your professional experience with working with terrorists and understanding also the importance of working on how we stop this, in regards to your comment before that you're surprised that these two alleged gunmen may have undergone militant training in the Philippines, and this could point to the fact there's a re-emergence of radicalisation and training in the Philippines, what does that say to you?
I'd hate to say I'm not surprised by it, and that's simply because in the prison system, there are offenders that continue to try and contact outside and continue to try and operate from inside. I'm not talking about prison radicalisation and radicalising other offenders. I'm talking about remaining true to the particular ideology and trying to continue to work on the outside. They try and obviously get out of prison. They don't want to be in prison, and that. There are a number of ways of getting out of prison, which, the government is well on top of course. But because of that, I know there's a lot of activity still going on. And so what's happened doesn't surprise me. There are still people that are very much against the peace process in the South. And if they link into broader objectives such as, establishing the Islamic Caliphate and Sharia law and so forth, then this is an indication of renewed terrorist activity, then that is of a concern, obviously.
So, Clarke, in regards to that, if this does point to the fact there has been some type of concerning resurgence in radicalisation and its effect of not only in the Philippines but right around the world, what can authorities do moving forward? Because that's the lessons we all need to learn. What can authorities do about this is front and centre again, and this is something we really need to keep an eye out for now?
Can I start at something that's going to be extremely difficult? I mean, we're seeing a shift in world politics. We're seeing atrocities committed in other parts of the world. Gaza, for example. It's very hard to address some of those international drivers. We've got, I won't name certain politicians, but we've got politicians that utilise the divide between religions and ethnic groups and so forth, and that's probably the worst thing we can do. So on that level, to make everybody, regardless of faith or colour, feel welcome is extremely important in Australia in particular, or even in the Philippines. So that's on that level. Politicians need to be very, very careful on the language they use. On a local level, I think we need to also, in relation to, social cohesion and making ethnic minorities feel very, very welcome. That will work to a certain extent. If someone has underlying, risk factors or psychological factors that make them vulnerable to this sort of behaviour, then, we've got to look at what we're doing in sort of localised programs. If people come to the attention, then maybe we need to follow it through with more, I won't say de-radicalisation programs, but programs that will support these people, whatever their risk factors are, or whatever their needs are, I should say.
To that point, Clarke, what degree do you think politicians from all sides have to be incredibly careful not to play a political game right now where there are very raw emotions, and to ensure that we are united and everyone feels safe in our country?
Yeah, that would be my number one point to focus on, would be whatever they say now in the media can be extremely helpful or extremely damaging. If we're playing one side off against the other, and I'm being very careful on my words I'm using, then, once again, everyone needs to feel safe. Everybody, doesn't matter what your background or is. And I'll use a dated example. I mean, when there was that the news about African gang crimes, that was extremely damaging to African communities. We know that's not true. In all various communities and backgrounds, whatever, there are youth crime. There always has been. If there's an escalation at one particular point, that doesn't mean we go and blame people of that particular background. It's something that we should then, knuckle down and try and work out and, giving everyone equal opportunity and, once again, that we're all safe.
Clarke, we really appreciate your insight and analysis. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
That was criminologist Dr Clarke Jones. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram @The Briefing Podcast. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company.